So I just got back from a pilgrimage to Turkey and Greece. One of the most beautiful places for you to visit in the world, it's really kind of really thought-provoking to visit, which is the city of Istanbul in Turkey. Istanbul is beautiful not only because it's so picturesque, the city itself is very picturesque, and it's a country, it's a city divided, where the dividing line between Asia and Europe is found. So through that river, a portion of it is Europe, the other portion is Asia. But what is beautiful about that city is that it shows, the very roots of that city is founded upon three very important empires: the Ottoman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and the Roman Empire. And those three empires have set foot in that entire city, in that entire place, and you can see traces of all those empires still today existing. I don't know of many cities like that that have that kind of a history where it has become a seat of those empires in the past. But what I can tell you is that all those three empires are gone. They're gone. And today, the Republic of Turkey is a free country of its own self. It's interesting, though, when you look at their history, how each of those empires, when they were ruling the land, that the way people lived, or where the rulers lived their lives, was almost presumptuous, that it almost was saying that this empire is never going to perish. There is this sort of presumption that the empire will continue forever and will never be run down, it will never be taken away, it will never disintegrate. And then we know today all those three great empires of Istanbul, of Turkey, of that area, of that city, have all now perished. Very interesting, because I think, there's this one story that they were telling us, our guy was telling us that during the Ottoman Empire, for example, the people what would you call them? The Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, or whoever was the head of the Ottoman Empire. They lived lavishly, that they never minded what was going on anywhere else in the world. They were just so caught up with themselves. When you go there today, you'd see how lavish they lived. They also did some really good things for the people around them, but just in general, it was like a cocoon. And he had his women all around, the harems everywhere. And then you would find the most amazing pieces of precious jewelries. They're now in the museum, but the biggest diamond in the world is there. 85 carat diamond. When you look at it, you're like, those of you who know diamond, 85 carat. Can you believe that? You're like, oh. But the empire is gone. As we study all these different stories of empires, not only perhaps in Europe, but also maybe in Asia, the dynasties in Asia, for example, you realize that one of the reasons why these empires disintegrate is when the morality of the people start to go tanky, when they start to go down. And morality and the norms of the people go down, the empire, that's the beginning of the demise of the empire. And it happened specifically, in fact, for example, in the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was wide and vast and powerful, and it went through different regions, not only in Europe, but also all the way to Asia. And you can tell how powerful the empire was. But at the beginnings of the demise of the Roman Empire was when people started to live immoral lives. When they are no longer connected on the mores of the people, and when they have turned away from their religiosity or their practice of religious values. So, it's something to think about in terms of who we are today as well. And it's good to look at that in the light of what this gospel really is saying today. When I was a kid, and I only knew of America from the people who were coming home from this country. From my village, there were a number of families that had relatives here in America, and they would go back home. And I would look around there when we would go and visit, whatever, and I'd see the home of the people, the American relatives. They have apples on their table. Apples during that time was like precious. Right? Apple, ooh, apple. I've never had apple before. And I also noticed how the boxes that come from America smell so good. You don't know that because you smell that every day and you don't know it. But there is such a thing as American scent. And when I was a kid, when those boxes, when my uncle was here already, and he would send a box, for example, to my grandma, I would stand in front of the box and they'd open it, and I would go, smell the box. As a kid, I looked at America as one of those great, powerful, superhero countries. Especially as I started to grow up and have more sense of what's going on in the world. In the 80s, for example, I really thought of America as a very powerful country, and everybody who goes there come home with big bosses. That's not so bad. That happens. And now that I'm here, I look at this great nation and I say to myself, oh, so this is the great nation that I looked up to as a child. And I put my critical eye, a critical lens on my eye looking at the country, and I say, yeah, it's kind of different now. It's kind of different from the America that I knew when I was growing up in the 80s. And I think the one big difference now, I think, is that, I'm not sure, but it seems like people are more confused in terms of their values. People are a bit more, it seems that people are not sure. There's so much polarization happening in this country. It really reminds me of what I've read about the beginnings of the demise of the Roman Empire. So it's quite interesting to look at it from that point of view, because really from the America from the 80s is now different from the America of 2014. Now, what might have gone different is that it seems to me that people are more confused morally today than ever before. And when we look at the readings today, especially the gospel that we read of Jesus here, with Jesus being confronted with a vicious and malicious question. So, teacher, tell us, what is your opinion? Is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar or not? It's a malicious question because we know that Caesar, actually, during this time, Caesar was considered like a god. The people looked at Caesar as God, being the big honcho, the big god, of the empire. They looked at him as like a god. And so, Jesus, I'm sure, was caught in that kind of tension that existed between looking at the power of the earthly kingdom and him recognizing the power of God that is in him, that as God. And so the response that he gave is, then repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God. It sounded like a really good response, because they heard what they wanted, which is to give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. What they did not know, it seems to me that if you think about this on a secondary reflection, is that the statement that says, and to God what belongs to God, was a correction of the first one. Repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, but give to God what belongs to God. And guess what belongs to God? Everything, including Caesar himself. So the irony of this response is, they heard what they wanted to hear, but they forgot the second part of it, which is God, give to God what belongs to God, was actually saying that God That at the end of the day, we have to recognize that whatever we give to Caesar also belongs to God Himself. So is it possible to really have today we understand the separation of church and state in a very different way. Not in the way that separation of church and state was actually intended. Today we look at separation of church and state as, okay, you church-going people, when you talk about God, just leave it alone in the confines of your own churches, and here we don't talk about God. That seems like the way we understand separation of church and state today, but that's not separation of church and state. In fact, there is no real separation of church and state the way some people want us to understand today, because really everything belongs to God, and we have to give to God that belongs to Him. And that is why when we are trying to be good citizens of America, okay, when we are trying to be good citizens of America, we are not just trying to be good citizens of that government. We are also trying to be good children of God when we are good citizens of this country. It is not supposed to be a black and white. It was never meant to be that way in the very first place. In fact, when we are doing good to others in the name of being good citizens of this nation, we are also in many ways paying homage to God, because everything is under God. Now, the Knights of Columbus, there have been revisions to the Pledge of Allegiance through the century, through the years, right? I don't know how many revisions have been done in the Pledge of Allegiance, but the Knights of Columbus, in one of the later revisions of the Pledge of Allegiance, added something, I think, that really defined the Pledge of Allegiance. The Knights of Columbus proposed to add the lines, just 2 words, under God, to the Pledge of Allegiance. And I thought it really, and if you look at the Pledge of Allegiance, it really completed. I thought it really completed the Pledge of Allegiance. And now the values are set right. And now the ordering of things are correct, and now everything is in its proper place. That we pledge allegiance to the flag and to what it symbolizes, to what it stands for, that it is one nation, but under God. And so that there is no polarization that could separate the country and disintegrate the country when the country is under God, because everything is under God. And so I think it's important for us to think about these kinds of things, because it affects how we order our values right. Together as Christians, as people, as believers of this land, of this nation, of this country, we have to always look at the eternal values, that are included or that are permeated into the values and cultures of this country. It is very important that we are always critical to what we're looking at, in order to not forget the universal and eternal truths, that sustain the temporal realities of these nations. And that's why, be it the Philippines, or America, or Mexico, or Poland, or Nigeria, or Brazil, or any other nation, I think the one thing that has to prevail above all is that all of these nations are supposed to be under God. Lest we become just like all the empires that have passed. Today, there's no Ottoman Empire, there's no Byzantine Empire, there is no Roman Empire. But you know what still exists today? It's not an empire. It's the kingdom. The kingdom of God that has manifested itself through the centuries and still manifests itself today. And this kingdom is the one that holds everything together. And it is this kingdom that will remain to the end of time. And you and I are citizens